My son and his wife called every bank I used and told them I was mentally incompetent. They think because my hair is gray, my mind is a blank slate they can write their own lies on. My son didn't just call the bank. He tried to delete my existence with a smile. But he forgot one thing: I'm the one who taught him how to walk, and I'm the one who's going to walk him straight into a courtroom. $42.16, Mrs. Magnus, Leo said, his smile as steady as the morning sun. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the worn leather of my wallet. I've lived in this town for 48 years. I've paid my mortgage, my taxes, and my tithes without missing a beat. I pulled out my debit card, the one linked to the account where my pension and my Social Security lived, and swiped it. Declined. I blinked. That's odd. Try it again, Leo. I just checked the balance yesterday. He swiped it again, a beat of silence. Declined. Maybe the chip is dusty, Leo suggested, his voice dropping an octave, sensing the sudden heat rising in my neck. I wiped the card on my cardigan and tried a third time. Declined. Contact financial institution. I have a credit card, I muttered, my heart starting a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. I pulled out my Visa. It was a card I kept for emergencies, usually with a zero balance. Declined. The line behind me was growing. I could feel the impatient shift of feet, the heavy sigh of the woman in the floral tracksuit holding a gallon of milk. I felt like a criminal. I felt small. I'm so sorry, Leo. I'll have to go to the bank. Just keep the groceries aside. Of course, Mrs. Magnus, don't you worry about it. But I did worry. I worried all the way to the First National branch on Main Street. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my Buick so hard my knuckles turned the color of bone. I had nearly $200,000 in those accounts. It wasn't just money, it was my autonomy. It was my ability to say no to the world. When I walked into the bank, the cool air felt like a slap. I headed straight for the manager's office. David Miller had handled my accounts for a decade. He was a man who prided himself on his personal touch. "Brooke," he said, standing up as I entered, but he didn't offer a handshake. He looked at me with a pained, squinting expression, the kind you give a dog that's been hit by a car. "I was wondering if you'd be coming in." "David, my cards are being declined, all of them. Is there a system glitch?" He sat back down, folding his hands over a thick manila folder I hadn't noticed before. "It's not a glitch, Brooke. We received a formal notification this morning, a flag for protective custody." "Protective what?" I laughed, though it sounded more like a bark. "I'm 68, David, not dead." "Who flagged my account?" He sighed, leaning forward. "Your son William and his wife Regina. They presented us with a power of attorney and a preliminary medical assessment. They expressed grave concerns about your cognitive health. They mentioned several incidents of financial mismanagement and disorientation." The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the guest chair. "Incidents? I haven't had a late payment in 30 years. "What are you talking about?" "They brought in a report, Brooke. It suggests you've been donating large sums to untraceable charities and that you were found wandering your neighborhood last Tuesday at 3 a.m., unable to find your own front door." "That's a lie," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I was in bed last Tuesday, and I don't donate to anyone but the local library." "I'm sorry," David said, and I realized then that he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the folder. "Until a formal competency hearing can be held, the bank has a fiduciary duty to protect the assets. The accounts are frozen to everyone, including you, except for essential life maintenance disbursements managed by William." I walked out of that bank in a trance. The sun felt too bright, the street too loud. I drove home, my mind racing through 1,000 memories, trying to find the incidents they had manufactured. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw it. William's black SUV was parked in front of my garage, and there they were, sitting on my porch swing. My son William looking at his shoes, and Regina, his wife, holding a thermos of tea. Regina stood up as I stepped out of the car. She wore a soft, empathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes that were as cold and calculating as a winter frost. "Oh, Brooke," Regina cooed, stepping down the porch stairs toward me. "We heard about the bank. Don't be upset. We're just trying to keep you safe. You've been so confused lately. We just couldn't let you hurt yourself anymore." William finally looked up. His face was a mask of practiced sorrow. "It's for the best, Mom. We're taking over the heavy lifting now. You just need to rest." I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, and the woman standing beside him like a puppeteer. I realized then that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a siege. They hadn't just called the banks. They had started the process of erasing Brooke Magnus, and they were doing it with a smile. The smell of pot roast hit me the second I opened my front door, but it didn't smell like my kitchen. It smelled like Regina's, heavy on the salt and rosemary, the scent of someone trying too hard to mimic a home they didn't belong in. "There she is," Regina called out from the kitchen, her voice trilling with a forced cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. "We thought we'd save you the trouble of cooking, Brooke. You looked so tired this afternoon. A little bit scattered." I stood in the entryway, my purse still clutched against my stomach like a shield. "I'm not tired, Regina, I'm furious. And I'd like my house keys back. I noticed they weren't on the hook when I came in." William emerged from the living room. He was holding a stack of my mail bills, a gardening magazine, a letter from my sister in Arizona. He didn't hand them to me, he tucked them into his back pocket. "We're just organizing things, Mom," he said, his voice low and placating. Regina noticed a few overdue notices. "We don't want you worrying about the technicalities anymore." "I don't have overdue notices, William. I have an Excel spreadsheet for my finances that is more accurate than the bank's." "See," Regina whispered, stepping into the hallway. She looked at William, then back to me with a pained, sympathetic smile. "That's what we mean, Brooke. You've been imagining these spreadsheets. We checked your computer. There's nothing there but empty folders." My heart skipped. I had spent 3 years meticulously logging every cent of my husband's life insurance and my own retirement. I pushed past them into my small home office. I fired up the desktop, my fingers trembling as I typed in my password. "Incorrect password." I tried again. "Incorrect password." "We had to change it," William said from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, looking at me with a mixture of pity and something else, something colder. "You were spending hours staring at a blank screen, Mom. The neighbors saw you through the window. They were worried you'd forgotten how to turn it off." "That is a lie." I spun around, my voice rising. "I was working on my taxes." "Who are these neighbors? Send them in here. Let them say it to my face." "Dinner's getting cold," Regina interrupted, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Let's not get agitated. Dr. Aris says stress only makes the fog thicker." "Who is Dr. Aris?" I demanded, shaking her hand off. "The specialist we consulted," she said smoothly, ushering me toward the dining room. "The one who reviewed the videos?" The dining table was set with my good china, the plates I only used for Christmas. It felt like a funeral wake for a woman who was still standing. I sat down, and Regina immediately began cutting a piece of roast into small, bite-sized cubes. "I can cut my own meat, Regina," I said, my voice ice cold. "Of course you can, dear," she said, continuing to hack away at the beef. "But it's just easier this way. We don't want any accidents with the knives, not after the incident with the hedge trimmers." "I haven't touched the hedge trimmers in 6 months," William sighed, a long, theatrical sound. "Mom, you were out there at midnight on Tuesday trying to prune the hydrangeas. I had to come over and take them from you. Don't you remember?" I stared at him. Tuesday at midnight. The bank manager had mentioned Tuesday, too. I remembered Tuesday perfectly. I had been reading a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt until 11 p.m., then I'd fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep. I hadn't been in the garden, I hadn't been wandering. I looked at Regina. She was watching me, her fork halfway to her mouth, a tiny, triumphant glint in her eyes. She was waiting for me to doubt myself. She was waiting for the moment I'd say, maybe I did. Maybe I just forgot. "I want to see these videos," I said, my voice steady. "I want to see the doctor, and I want my money unfrozen by tomorrow morning, or I'm calling the police." The room went silent. William looked at his plate. Regina set her fork down with a deliberate clink. "We already called them, Brooke," Regina said softly. "The local precinct has a silver alert profile for you now, just in case you wander off again. If you call them, they'll just see it as another symptom of your condition." She leaned in, her face inches from mine. I could smell the peppermint on her breath. "You're not a mother anymore, Brooke. You're a liability. And we're going to make sure you're very, very well taken care of, whether you like it or not." I looked at my son. He didn't say a word. He just kept eating his salted, rosemary-heavy beef while his wife dismantled my life. That night, after they finally left, locking my own front door from the outside for my safety, I sat in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went to the kitchen and looked at the roast Regina had left behind. I grabbed the plate and threw it, meat and all, into the trash. They thought I was losing my mind. They thought they could rewrite my history with a few forged documents and a gentle tone, but they forgot one thing. I was the one who taught William how to walk. I was the one who built this life from nothing after his father died. I wasn't wandering, I was just getting started. The silence of the house at 3 a.m. wasn't peaceful, it was heavy like the air before a cyclone. I sat in my darkened office, the glow of the monitor mocking me. Incorrect password. I tried every combination: William's birthday, my wedding anniversary, the name of the street I grew up on. Nothing. They hadn't just changed the password, they had scrubbed me. By 9 a.m. I was back at First National. I didn't go to David Miller's office this time. I walked straight to the teller line, my back as straight as a garden stake. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," I said to a young woman named Sarah. $2,000. Cash? Sarah didn't look at me, she looked at her screen, her brow furrowing. "Mrs. Magnus, I can't, there's a flag, a heavy one. It says all transactions over $50 must be authorized by the primary conservator. I am the owner of this account, Sarah. I am not a child. I know, but the notes here, they're very specific." She leaned in, her voice a ghost of a whisper. "They say you've been targeted by international scammers and that you believe you're sending money to a secret prince. They even attached a transcript of a call." My stomach turned. "A call? I haven't spoken to any princes. It's right here, Brooke." A shadow fell over the counter. David Miller had emerged from his office. He held a tablet in his hand. "Sarah, I'll take it from here." He turned the screen toward me. "We were shown this yesterday afternoon. It's a recording from your home phone, Brooke." He hit play. The voice that came out of the speakers was mine. It was my cadence, my slight Midwestern lilt. "Yes, I understand," the voice said, sounding breathless and confused. "I'll send the 30,000 by wire. Please don't tell my son, he wouldn't understand the mission." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I never said that. That's a fake. It's AI or something," David sighed, shaking his head. "Brooke, the technology to fake a voice that perfectly doesn't exist for retail use. This was recorded by your daughter-in-law on her own phone while she was in the kitchen with you. She said you were talking to the toaster." I stared at the screen. Regina, she hadn't just lied, she had performed. She must have recorded me saying snippets of sentences over months and stitched them together. Or she'd waited until I was talking to myself, something I'd done since my husband died, and twisted the context. "And then there's this," David said, sliding his finger across the tablet. It was a video from a Nest camera. The timestamp said Tuesday, 2:48 a.m. The figure in the video was wearing my favorite blue silk robe. She was standing in the middle of the street, spinning in slow circles, clutching a toaster to her chest. Her hair was a mess. She looked terrified, she looked insane. "That's not me," I whispered, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The woman in the video had her back to the camera most of the time, but the robe was unmistakable. The height was right. "The house in the background was mine. The police were called." "Brooke," David said gently. "William handled it. He didn't want you arrested for public nuisance, so he took you back inside. That's why the flag is there. To protect you from yourself." I backed away from the counter, the walls of the bank beginning to close in. Every head in the lobby seemed to turn toward me. I could see the pity in their eyes. The crazy lady of Maple Street. I walked out into the humid morning air, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I got into my Buick and sat there for a long time, staring at the glove box. They had the voice. They had the video, they had the bank manager. I looked at my hands. They were steady despite the hurricane in my head. I remembered the blue silk robe. I'd seen it in the wash yesterday. Regina had been doing the laundry. She'd made a big show of how helpful she was being. She hadn't been doing laundry. She'd been costume shopping in my own closet. I realized then that Regina wasn't just after the money, she was after the truth. If she could make everyone, including me, believe I was a hollow shell, then the house, the savings, and the memories wouldn't belong to me anymore. They'd be found property. I put the car in gear. I didn't go home. I drove to the one place Regina wouldn't think to look, the old hardware store on the edge of town where my husband's best friend Artie still worked the counter. "Artie," I said, walking in. The smell of sawdust and oil was the first thing that had felt like home in 3 days. "Brooke, you look like you've seen a ghost." I have, Artie, I've seen the ghost of my own sanity. I leaned over the counter. I need something. And I need you to tell me exactly how it works. I need a camera, not a digital one, not one that connects to the cloud or the internet. I need something that records to a physical card, something hidden. Artie squinted at me. What's going on, Brooke? My son is trying to sell my house while I'm still in it, I said, my voice hardening. And his wife is playing dress-up in the middle of the street to prove I've lost my mind. I need to catch the ghost on film. Artie didn't ask another question. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, black box. This is a trail cam, Brooke. Hunters use it. It triggers on motion. No wires, no Wi-Fi. Just a battery and a memory card. I'll take it, I said. And Artie, I don't have any cash. My accounts are frozen. He pushed the box toward me. Consider it a loan from your husband. He once pulled me out of a snowbank at 4 a.m. I think we're even. I tucked the box under my arm. The digital blackout was total, but the analog world was still mine. And in the analog world, ghosts leave footprints. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, the transformation had begun. My home, the one I'd scrubbed, painted, and filled with 40 years of laughter, didn't look like mine anymore. A man in a neon vest was hammering a sign into the dormant winter grass of my front lawn. For sale, charming historic colonial. Contact Regina Vaughn Realty. The air left my lungs in a sharp, painful whistle. My car was barely in park before I was out the door. Excuse me, that's my house, take that down immediately. The man didn't even look up. Sorry, lady, order came from the owners, William and Regina Magnus. They said the tenant was being relocated to a care facility today. Tenant. The word felt like a physical blow. I am Brooke Magnus, I am the owner. Mom, stop, you're making a scene. William appeared from the front door, his face a mask of weary patience. He walked down the steps and took my arm, his grip firm. The neighbors are watching, you don't want them to see you like this. Like what, William? Like a woman being robbed in broad daylight? We talked about this at dinner, he lied, his voice loud enough for the signposter to hear. You said you couldn't handle the stairs anymore. You said the house felt too big, too empty. We're just following your wishes. He led me inside, and the click of the deadbolt behind us sounded like a cell door. The house was different. My Persian rug was rolled up in the corner. My husband's roll-top desk was empty, the drawers hanging open like tongues. Regina was in the kitchen, checking a clipboard. She looked up, her smile razor-sharp. Oh, Brooke, you're just in time. The movers will be here at noon for the essentials. We've picked out a lovely suite for you at the Willows. It has a view of the pond. The Willows is a memory care unit, Regina. I'm not going. It's for your safety, dear, Regina said, walking toward me. She reached out to tuck a stray hair behind my ear, and I flinched. She didn't blink. You left the stove on this morning. I had to come over and turn it off. The whole house smelled of gas. You could have blown up the neighborhood. I haven't used the stove today. I went to the bank. See, Regina looked at William. She's losing time again. Brooke, you were standing over the burner for 20 minutes. I have it on the kitchen camera. She pointed to a small, white plastic dome tucked into the corner of the ceiling. A nanny cam. I hadn't seen it there yesterday. I'm calling a lawyer, I said, reaching for the wall phone. The line is disconnected, William said, not looking at me. We're switching you to a simplified senior phone. It only has 3 buttons, me, Regina, and emergency services. For your protection? I felt a cold, oily dread wash over me. They had cut my lines, frozen my money, and now they were erasing my physical space. I was being packaged for disposal. I need to go to the bathroom, I said, my voice trembling. I needed to get away from their eyes, their concern, their suffocating presence. Of course, Regina said. William, stay by the door. We don't want her locking herself in again like last night. I retreated to the downstairs powder room. I leaned against the sink, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked in the mirror. I looked older, grayer. The crazy lady they were inventing was starting to show in the hollows of my eyes. Then I felt the trail cam in the pocket of my oversized cardigan. I looked up. There was a small decorative vent high on the wall leading to the crawlspace behind the stairs, a space Regina would never bother to clean. I stood on the toilet seat, my knees popping, and shoved the trail cam into the shadows of the vent, angling it toward the hallway where they stood. Motion activated. No Wi-Fi, just the truth. When I came out, Regina was standing there with a suitcase. Time to go, Brooke. The wellness van is out front. I'm not leaving without my husband's birdhouse, I said suddenly. William frowned. The birdhouse. Mom, it's an old piece of cedar. We'll buy you a new one at the gift shop. No, it's the last thing he built. I want it. I marched out to the backyard before they could stop me. The birdhouse sat on a post near the hydrangeas. It was a heavy thing built of solid oak. I reached up and pulled it off the peg. Inside, tucked into the false bottom my husband had built for his fishing money, was a roll of hundreds. $2,000. The analog stash? I felt the weight of it against my palm. It wasn't just cash, it was a weapon. Got it, I said, turning back to them. I allowed William to lead me to the van. I allowed the driver to help me into the seat. I even allowed Regina to blow me a kiss from the driveway. They thought they were sending me to a prison. They didn't realize they had just given me a base of operations. As the van pulled away, I looked at the for sale sign one last time. Regina was already on her cell phone, likely talking to a buyer. She looked triumphant. But as we rounded the corner, I reached into the birdhouse and felt the cold, hard edges of the cash. Go ahead, Regina, I whispered to the glass. Sell the house, but you're going to find out that a mother's memory is a very, very expensive thing to steal. The Willows wasn't a prison in the way I'd imagined. It was worse. It was a place of beige carpets, muted television sets, and the smell of industrial lavender. It was a place designed to make you forget you were a person. Here we are, Brooke, Regina said, her voice echoing in the sterile hallway. Suite 212, it's got a lovely view of the parking lot, the pond. I walked into the room. It was half the size of my kitchen. My favorite armchair sat in the corner, looking lonely and out of place. My husband's photo was on the nightstand, but the glass was cracked. I want my phone, I said, turning to William. He handed me a bulky white plastic device with 3 giant buttons. One had his face, one had Regina's, and the third was a red cross. It's all you need, Mom, no more telemarketers. No more confusion. I tucked the senior phone into my robe and waited. I waited until they had kissed my cheek, a dry, rehearsed gesture, and promised to come back for Sunday brunch. I waited until the sound of Regina's heels faded down the hallway. Then I reached into the birdhouse. The $2,000 felt like a live wire in my hand. In a world of digital freezes and power of attorney, cash was the only thing that still had a heartbeat. I walked to the nurse's station. A young man with a nose ring and a tired expression was filing charts. Excuse me, I said, leaning over the desk. I'm Brooke Magnus. I'd like to hire a car to take me to Millfield. Mrs. Magnus, you're on the restricted list. Your son said you shouldn't leave the grounds without an escort. I looked at him. I didn't look confused. I didn't look like a tenant. I looked like the woman who had run a school board for 20 years. I slid a $50 bill across the counter, hidden under a brochure for gentle yoga. I have an appointment with a specialist, dear. My son is very busy and I don't want to bother him. Can you call a private car, not an Uber, a car service? He looked at the 50, then he looked at the restricted note on his screen. The car service won't check the list, he muttered, pocketing the bill. They just want the fare, 10 minutes. I didn't take my purse, I didn't take my coat. I walked out the side door in my cardigan, clutching the birdhouse like a sacred relic. The car took me to a small, dusty office above a hardware store in downtown Millfield. I'd seen the name on a plaque years ago, Arthur Penhaligon, attorney at law. Arthur was 80 if he was a day. He wore a waistcoat that smelled of pipe tobacco and peppermint. He looked at me over his spectacles. Brooke Magnus, I haven't seen you since your husband's estate was settled. You look troubled. Artie, they're erasing me. I sat down and told him everything, the bank, the videos, the wandering, the for sale sign. He listened without interrupting, his gnarled fingers tapping a rhythm on his desk. When I finished, he sighed. It's a classic play, Brooke. They're using the gray zone. Too sane to be committed, too confused to fight back. By the time a court gets around to a hearing, the house is sold, the money is gone, and you've been in the Willows so long you actually do start to lose your mind. I need to fight them, Artie. I have $2,000 in cash. Is that enough? For a retainer? No. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. But for a counteroffensive, it might be. Brooke, do you still have that old ledger your husband kept? The one with the physical receipts for the house improvements? William took it. He said he was organizing the mail. Then we need something else, something they didn't count on. Did you ever record the house, not for security, but for Memories? I froze. I remembered the trail cam. It was still in the vent, hidden behind the stairs of the house they were currently trying to sell. I have a camera, I whispered, but it's in the house. And the house is locked. Then we need to go back, Artie said, standing up with a groan. But we can't just break in, that would prove their point. We need a reason to be there, a wellness check of our own. He reached for his coat. I'm still on your husband's old emergency contact list at the precinct. They haven't updated their files in decades. If I call in a report of a suspicious person at the Magnus residence, the police will show up. And as your legal counsel, I'll be right behind them. And the money? I asked, holding up the birdhouse. Keep it, Artie said. You're going to need it to buy a very specific piece of technology. A burner phone with a high-resolution screen. If that trail cam caught what I think it did, we're not just going to stop the sale, we're going to burn their concern to the ground. I followed him out into the cold afternoon air. For the first time in a week, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a soldier. The analog resistance was moving, and Regina was about to find out that protective custody works both ways. The courtroom in Millfield smelled of old paper and floor wax. It was a small, wood-paneled room that felt more like a chapel than a place of law. I sat at the petitioner's table, my back straight, wearing the navy suit I'd worn to my husband's funeral. It was the only thing I had that still fit the person I used to be. William and Regina sat across the aisle. Regina was a vision of performed grief, black dress, a single strand of pearls, and a lace handkerchief she kept dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. William just looked at the floor. All rise, the bailiff droned. Judge Holloway was a woman who looked like she'd seen every trick in the book. She peered over her spectacles at the thick folder on her desk, the one Regina had spent months filling with evidence. This is an emergency petition for permanent guardianship and conservatorship of Brooke Magnus, the judge began. Petitioner, you have the floor. Regina stood up. Her voice was a soft, trembling vibrato. Your Honor, it breaks our hearts to be here. Brooke is more than a mother-in-law to me. She's a light, but that light is flickering. We've documented dozens of incidents. Disorientation, financial recklessness, and most recently, a complete break from reality where she was found wandering the streets in her nightgown, clutching a kitchen appliance. She paused, letting the appliance detail hang in the air like a bad smell. We've moved her to the Willows for her own safety, Regina continued, but she remains combative. She's even begun hiring unauthorized drivers to spirit her away to secret meetings. We fear she is being targeted by elder abuse scammers, or worse, that she's simply no longer capable of discerning friend from foe. And the medical report? The judge asked. Dr. Aris, a specialist in geriatric cognitive decline, has reviewed the footage and the call logs, Regina said, sliding a paper across the bench. His preliminary diagnosis is stage 2 dementia with high-risk delusional spikes. I felt Artie's hand on my arm. He didn't move, he didn't object, he just waited. Mrs. Magnus, the judge said, looking at me, do you understand why your son and daughter-in-law are concerned? I stood up. I didn't look at Regina, I looked at the judge. I understand that they are concerned about my house, Your Honor. I understand they are concerned about the $200,000 in my retirement account. And I understand they are very concerned that I might remember what actually happened on Tuesday night. Your Honor, Regina gasped. This is exactly what the doctor warned us about, the paranoia, the lashing out at those who love her. I have the doctor's report right here, Regina, I said, my voice steady. But I also have something else. Artie stood up and opened a leather briefcase. He pulled out a small, black memory card, the one from the trail cam I'd retrieved during the wellness check he'd orchestrated. Your Honor, Artie said, we'd like to submit a rebuttal, not a medical opinion, just a recording. A recording of what? The judge asked. A recording from a motion-activated camera hidden in the Magnus residence, Artie said. Dated Tuesday, 2:45 a.m., the exact time the petitioners claim my client was wandering in the street. Regina's face went the color of curdled milk. She tried to speak, but only a small, squeaking sound came out. Artie handed a tablet to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. The room went silent as the video began to play. I couldn't see the screen from where I sat, but I knew what was on it. I'd seen it in Artie's office an hour ago. The video showed the hallway of my home. It showed Regina, dressed in my blue silk robe, teasing her hair into a bird's nest in front of the mirror. It showed her picking up my toaster and walking out the front door, laughing. And then it showed William. He was standing by the door holding his phone, filming her. "Is the lighting okay?" Regina's voice came through the tablet's speakers, clear as a bell. "Does it look like she's lost?" "Perfect," William's voice replied. "The bank manager will eat this up. We'll have the for sale sign up by Friday." The judge looked up from the tablet. Her eyes were no longer tired. They were cold. They were the eyes of a woman who was about to dismantle a lie. She looked at Regina, then she looked at William. "Mr. Magnus," the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "do you have anything to say before I refer this matter to the district attorney for perjury and fraud?" William didn't answer. He just covered his face with his hands. Regina, however, didn't give up. She stood up, her pearls clacking. That's a deep fake. She's used that scammer money to frame us." "Your Honor, you can't believe a woman who thinks a birdhouse is a bank." "Sit down, Mrs. Von Magnus," the judge said. "Sit down before I have the bailiff escort you to a cell." The gavel hit the bench with a sound like a gunshot. "Petition denied," the judge declared. "All flags on the Magnus accounts are to be lifted immediately. A permanent restraining order is hereby issued against the petitioners pending a criminal investigation into the fabrication of evidence." I sat back down. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. I had won. My house was mine. My money was mine. My name was mine. But as I looked at the back of my son's head as he was led out of the room by a court officer, I realized the one thing I couldn't win back. I'd saved my life, but I'd lost my son. "Brooke," Artie asked, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I looked at the empty aisle where they had been sitting. I thought about the blue silk robe now sitting in an evidence bag. "I'm fine, Artie," I said, my voice finally cracking. "I'm just ready to go home." The police escort dropped me off at the curb of my own home just as the sun began to dip behind the old oaks. The for sale sign was gone, ripped out of the dirt so violently that a jagged hole remained in my lawn. It felt like a tooth had been pulled from a smile. "You sure you're okay, Brooke?" the officer asked, his hand hovering near his holster. He'd seen the video in the courtroom. He knew what kind of snakes I'd been living with. "I'm fine, officer. I just need to see my house." I walked up the porch steps. The wood groaned under my feet, a familiar, welcoming sound. I pulled my spare key, the one Artie had kept in his safe, and turned the lock. The click was the sweetest music I'd heard in a decade, but the moment I stepped inside, the sweetness curdled. The house was cold, not just winter cold, but empty cold. Regina hadn't just tried to sell the house. She'd begun looting it. My silver service was gone. The mantel where my husband's ashes had sat in a ceramic urn was bare. The walls were stripped of the oil paintings we'd collected in Maine. "Regina," I whispered, the name tasting like ash. I walked into the kitchen. On the island where I used to roll out pie crusts sat a single manila folder. It wasn't hidden, it was displayed like a trophy. I opened it. Inside were printouts of my bank statements from the last 3 years, but they weren't the ones I recognized. These were highlighted in neon yellow. Every donation to the library, every check written to the local animal shelter, every cash withdrawal for a birthday gift, it was all labeled in Regina's cramped, angry handwriting. Transaction 402, sign of diminished capacity. Transaction 511, unreasonable spending. Transaction 602, evidence of scammer influence. She hadn't just been tracking my money. She'd been building a narrative of my insanity for years. This wasn't a sudden grab for cash, it was a long game execution. Then I saw the final page. It was a contract. A private agreement between Regina Von Realty and a developer named Green Space Estates. The price for my home was listed at $400,000, well below market value, and then I saw the kickback. A consultation fee of $50,000 payable directly to Regina's private LLC upon my placement in a permanent care facility. My own daughter-in-law had put a bounty on my head. I felt a sudden, sharp movement in the hallway. I spun around, my heart hammering. "Who's there?" A shadow detached itself from the dining room. It was William. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He wasn't wearing handcuffs, but he looked like a man who'd already been sentenced. "Mom," he said, his voice a ghost of itself. "The police let me come by to get my things. They're charging Regina with first-degree fraud. And they're looking at me for complicity." "Did you know, William?" I asked, gesturing to the folder. "Did you know she had a price tag on my bedroom?" He looked at the floor. "She said we were drowning, Mom. She said the mortgage was underwater and the kids' college funds were empty. She said you wouldn't even notice, that you'd be happy at the Willows, that you'd have friends and activities." And the video, the toaster. "The silk robe, she practiced for weeks," William whispered. "She watched the way you walked, the way you tilt your head when you're confused. She said it was mercy, that if we didn't do it this way, the state would take everything anyway." I looked at my son, the boy I'd taught to be kind, the man I'd been so proud of. I realized then that he wasn't a villain in the way Regina was. He was something worse. He was a coward. He had traded his mother's soul for a consultation fee. "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a mountain. "Mom, please, I have nowhere to go." Regina took the car keys. She's cleared out our joint account and disappeared. "I don't care, William. You can sleep in the street. You can sleep in the green space development for all I care. But you are not sleeping in this house." He looked like he wanted to argue, to plead, to play the confused son one last time, but then he looked at my eyes. He saw the woman who had survived a week in a beige prison. He saw the woman who had hidden a camera in a vent. He saw a mother who was done being a victim. He turned and walked out the door without another word. I stood in my empty kitchen for a long time. I looked at the bare walls, the empty mantel, the highlighted lies in the folder. Then I went to the sink and turned on the water. I washed my hands, scrubbing until the skin was pink. I dried them on a clean towel, then walked to the phone on the wall. The line was still dead, but I didn't need it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone Artie had given me. I dialed his number. "Artie, it's Brooke." "I'm home. How is it?" he asked. "It's empty," I said, looking at the spot where the silver used to be. "But the locks are changed. And Artie, I need you to do one more thing for me. I want to sue, not just for the money. I want to sue for every second of my life they tried to steal." "You got it, Brooke," Artie said. "And the sun." I looked out the window. William was standing on the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped, looking at the for sale hole in the yard. "I don't have a son," I said. "I just have a house, and that's exactly how I want it." The courtroom was different this time. It wasn't a small, dusty room in Millfield. It was the county superior court, and the air was thick with the scent of consequences. I sat behind Artie, watching the back of Regina's head. She wasn't wearing pearls today. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair limp and unstyled, stripped of the glamour she'd used as a weapon. William sat 3 rows back in the gallery, a spectator in his own destruction. He'd avoided jail time by turning state's evidence against his wife, a final act of cowardice that had secured Regina's sentence but cost him his soul. "Regina Von Magnus," the judge intoned, "you have been found guilty of identity fraud, perjury, and felony theft from an at-risk adult. This court finds your actions not just criminal but predatory." The sentence was 6 years. Regina didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just turned her head and looked at me, a flicker of that old, sharp malice in her eyes. But it didn't burn me anymore, it was just a dying spark in a cold room. As they led her away, the bailiff handed Artie a final packet of documents. The civil judgment. $85,000 in restitution, Artie whispered, sliding the paper toward me. "Plus the return of the silver and the paintings. We tracked them to a pawn shop in the next county." Regina had already spent the cash on a down payment for a beach house she'll never see. I looked at the number, $85,000. It was the price they had put on my mind. It was the cost of my incompetence. "What are you going to do with it, Brooke?" Artie asked as we walked out into the crisp spring air. I looked at the courthouse steps. William was standing by a lamp post, shifting from foot to foot. He looked like he wanted to approach me. He looked like he had a "Mom, I'm sorry" speech ready to go. I didn't give him the chance. I walked past him as if he were a shadow, heading straight for my Buick. "I'm going to the bank, Artie," I said. "And then I'm going to the library." I drove to First National. David Miller was behind his desk, looking like he wanted to crawl into the floorboards. I didn't wait for him to speak. I handed him the court order. "Unfreeze everything, David, and then I want to wire $50,000. "To where, Brooke?" he asked, his voice trembling. "To the Millfield Senior Center," I said. "Tell them it's for a new computer lab. And a class on digital literacy. I want every grandmother in this county to know how to spot a shark even when the shark is sleeping in the guest room." The rest of the afternoon was quiet. I went to the antique shop and reclaimed my silver. I went to the gallery and took back my paintings. By sunset, my house looked like mine again. My husband's urn was back on the mantel and the Persian rug was unrolled in the center of the room. I sat on my porch swing, the birdhouse resting on my lap. The analog stash was gone, replaced by a simple, handwritten note from Artie, case closed. A car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the black SUV. William had lost that to the creditors. It was a battered old sedan. William stepped out. He walked halfway up the lawn and stopped, staring at the spot where the for sale sign used to be. "Mom," he called out. "I don't have a place to stay. The house is being foreclosed on." I thought, maybe just for a few days. I looked at him. I remembered the boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for a bandage. I remembered the man who watched his wife play dress-up in my robe and didn't say a word. "You told the bank I was mentally incompetent, William," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the lawn. "You told the judge I didn't know what year it was. You told the world I was a stranger." "I was wrong, Mom. I was under her spell." "No," I said, standing up. "You weren't under a spell. You were under a price tag. And the price of your freedom was my life." I walked to the front door and placed my hand on the handle. "I'm 68 years old, William. I have my mind, I have my house, and I have my dignity. What I don't have is a son who sells his mother for a consultation fee." I stepped inside and turned the deadbolt. It was the last time I would ever hear his voice from my porch. That night, I made a pot roast. I didn't use too much salt and I didn't use any rosemary. I sat at my table using my good china and my reclaimed silver. I ate in the silence, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like victory. They tried to tell me I was losing my mind. They tried to tell me the world was too big and too fast for a woman like me, but they forgot that a mother knows every corner of the house she built. I looked at the photo of my husband on the nightstand. I smiled. "I'm still here," I whispered to the empty room, "and I'm not going anywhere." The crazy lady of Maple Street was gone. In her place sat Brooke Magnus, a woman who knew exactly what year it was, exactly how much was in her bank account, and exactly how much it cost to be free. It was worth every penny.